Chapter 124 to 130. Shinichi fell into a daze as he saw Kuroto hovering in midair, with his body wrapped in what appeared to be a cyan chakra cloak and carrying a golden chakra sword. He couldn't help but mutter in wonder, what kind of ninjutsu is this? As he said that, Shinichi paused and finally said after shaking his head, no, this isn't some ninjutsu, this should be your pupil technique, right? But Byakugan shouldn't have any such ability. There are so many things that you don't know of, said Kuroto with a light voice. Kuroto would obviously not explain just what is the Tenseigan. What is Tenseigan chakra mode? What is the golden will reincarnation explosion? Etc. After all, protecting his intelligence has become a sort of an instinct for him. Is that so? I guess I wasn't wrong, you are really not an ordinary Hyuga, now I can be sure of that. Taking a deep breath, Shinichi gradually calmed down. Although the chakra pressure emanating from Kuroto in the Tenseigan chakra mode was extremely powerful, it still didn't affect Shinichi too much, but only aroused his eagerness to win against Hyuga Kuroto even more. Looking at the current state of Hyuga Kuroto, Shinichi was now reminded of the time when he first dueled against him. Even back then, after his loss, Shinichi was able to grasp something that led him to doubt that Hyuga Kuroto is not some ordinary Hyuga, but because Shinichi's loss was too miserable that it even made him embarrassed about it, so, he chose not to speak anything about it, because even if he said anything the other Uchiha clansmen would not pay any attention to his words and just think that he is making excuses to cover his failure. So, that wasn't worth it, but Shinichi still didn't let go of that. And now that he has seen the unique pupil technique, Shinichi understood that his initial guess wasn't wrong. At this time, Kuroto slowly raised his hand to lift the dazzling golden sword. Well now, this kind of battle is fair. Shinichi muttered with a strong will, and then shouted, Hyuga Kuroto, Uchiha Shinichi will not lose to you twice. After leaving this sentence, Shinichi exerted more of his chakra to further enhance his Susanoo that started growing muscles over it and transformed into a half-body warrior Susanoo. Due to overexerting his eyes, even blood started to drip out of them. But that stops Shinichi to continue. And a roar echoed throughout the forest, following which two more sets of arms appeared on the Susanoo. As soon as this transformation was completed, Kuroto, who was observing all the changes happening, immediately slashed the golden sword. At the same time, Susanoo's arms were also raised while a sword made out of dark green chakra appeared to match the golden sword's slash. Wouch! With the sound of breaking wind, two chakra blades projection meet each other, sending intense wind pressure to the surroundings. Blocked. Shinichi was happy that his Susanoo projection sword could block that golden sword. Break. However, before he could be too overjoyed, the sound of cracking reached his ears. And immediately afterward, one set of arms was cut through and faded away. And that wasn't it, just moments later the entire Susanoo also started breaking away as various cracks appeared in its skeletal defense. Although it is said that Susanoo armor has an almost perfect defense, it still couldn't resist the cutting effect of the golden will reincarnation explosion. Shinichi was highly shocked that Kuroto could cut through Susanoo's perfect defense and immediately flickered away from that spot, as he suddenly had a bad feeling. As soon as Shinichi disappeared from his spot, the entire Susanoo crumbled. Cough cough. Shinichi, who appeared on the other side, wiped away the blood from the corner of his mouth and muttered in shock, how could it be possible? Susanoo was easily cut in half. Shinichi even wondered whether he is under a genjutsu attack. After all, Susanoo should have a perfect defense. It is the symbol of absolute. But contrary to what he thought, the absolute was now broken. On the other side, Kuroto's expression remained calm. Since he used only one truth-seeking orb to summon the golden sword, so it is understandable that it couldn't cut through Susanoo's defense in one swipe, but took a bit of effort. Glancing on the other side where the rest of the members of Team 11 were fighting, Kuroto muttered inwardly, I can't drag this for too long. Although both of them are far from the others, it is still possible to sense the movements of the other side, therefore, Kuroto was able to perceive that some of the cloud ninjas are rushing here. Shinichi, who was ignored for a moment, roared in frustration, damn it, where do you think you are looking? I still haven't lost yet. Without waiting for Kuroto to turn over, Shinichi urged his Menjikyu, and again the projection of Susanoo covered his body and immediately punched Kuroto with all four of its arms. Punch. 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 At the same time, on another part of the battlefield, Shisui, who was surrounded by a dozen or so Chunin and Jonin, looked anxiously in the direction where Kuroto and Shinichi were fighting. Although Shisui isn't a sensor class, he was still able to perceive Susanoo's chakra fluctuation and understood that Shinichi has used the mighty Susanoo armor. Shisui perfectly understands the power of Susanoo, and that's why he wasn't worried about Kuroto-san's safety. In Shisui's mind, Kuroto-san, who could flatten an entire valley along with hundreds of cloud ninjas in a few minutes, has long surpassed the level of Manjikyu Sharingan and is undoubtedly the current strongest in Konoha. Therefore, Shisui wasn't worried about Kuroto-san's safety but Shinichi's safety. Shisui doesn't want Shinichi to die. While Shisui was worried about Shinichi's safety, a young Kunoichi walked in from the other side. From just a single glance, Shisui realized who she is and his face sank. It's because the person is none other than the Nibi's Jinchuriki, Yujito Ni, a jonin of Kumo. As Yujito Ni walked in, the clear anger and coldness in her eyes didn't escape Shisui's perception as she said, "Huh. Konoha Umbu Team 11, this time I finally caught you guys." Shisui immediately questioned with anger, "Are you Kumo shinobi so shameless that you again want to break the peace and start the war?" "Peace? War?" With a cold smile, Yujito Ni continued, "If not for your rat tricks in the land of hot water, Konoha would have already been under our control." "And what about the destroy?" Before Shisui could finish his words, a sudden golden light flashed across the horizon that not only attracted his attention but also attracted Jinchuriki's attention as both of them wondered, what happened over there? The dazzling golden light that was shining like a golden curtain looked especially magnificent in the dimming dusky sky. It appeared as if the sun that has just sunk a few moments ago climbed up again, leaving a golden hue in the night blue sky. Boom. 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 Before anyone could react to the sudden golden light, there were a series of loud rumbling noises from the place where the golden curtain shone. The earth trembled and the forest shook. From the intense vibrations that disrupted everything around, it felt as if two titans were fighting in the distance, causing massive shock waves in the entire forest. Shisui's face was solemn at this moment because he was aware that these vibrations were all coming from the direction where Kuroto-san and Shinichi were fighting. Yujito Ni also frowned with an unsure expression. As the commander who led the response this time, she was initially skeptical of Uchiha Shinichi's insistence on singling out Hyuga Kuroto. But considering that he had what Reikage-sama described as a dojutsu called the Manjikyu Sharingan, led her to have no choice but to agree. Yujito Ni doesn't know what actually is Manjikyu Sharingan, but it should be something highly valuable for the Kumo, considering that Reikage-sama sent them all here just to retrieve it. But as a perfect Jinchuriki, Yujito Ni obviously looked down on the Uchiha brat, but now she is unsure of that thought and muttered in surprise, could it be that Uchiha Shinichi and Hyuga Kuroto are fighting there? The entire ambush point is under her perception and she can't sense either of them here, so only the distant battlefield that is outside the ambush point, and also the place where those vibrations are coming from is the place where those two might be fighting. But this further confused her, because as far as she believes, neither Uchiha Shinichi nor Hyuga Kuroto should be capable of causing such big movements. After all, in Yujito Ni's concept, only Jinchuriki with their tailed beasts are capable of such large-scale terrain damage. Noticing Yujito Ni's confusion, Shisui hardened his gaze and understood that he couldn't delay anymore. Choosing to believe that Kuroto-san would definitely not kill Shinichi, Shisui resolved himself to take care of the Jinchuriki to avoid the continuation of war. After making up his mind, Shisui activated the Manjikyu Sharingan. Immediately following this, an emerald green Susanoo was projected from his body. Yujito Ni was shocked seeing such a scene and immediately retreated backward. What is that? Wait, his eyes look different from a normal Sharingan. Is that a Manjikyu Sharingan? Does that mean he also has a Manjikyu Sharingan? The Kumo ninjas that witnessed Shisui's Susanoo were all buried by Kuroto at the valley in the Land of Lightning, so the accurate information about Shisui's Manjikyu Sharingan and Susanoo is unknown to most. And since Shinichi didn't describe what Manjikyu Sharingan is capable of, so Yujito Ni wasn't much aware of what's Susanoo. Shisui ignored Yujito Ni's shocked expression and declared, "I'll never let Shinichi defect to Kumo." With that declaration, Shisui's figure flickered and rushed out. In just an instant the chakra needles fired by him pierced through many Chunin and Jonin, killing them immediately. Undoubtedly, with the increasing age, physical development, and repeated usage, Shisui's body is slowly but steadily adapting to Susanoo, and now he has become more comfortable in controlling the powers of his Manjikyu Sharingan. On Kakashi's side, the sharp sound of Chidori mixed with the wailing and grunting sounds of ninjas echoed in the surroundings. While supporting himself and releasing Chidori, Kakashi squatted himself on a tree, panting lightly, and observed his surroundings with the Sharingan. Kakashi has of course noticed the golden light on the horizon, therefore, he didn't have any more interest to play hide and seek with these Kumo ninjas. Swish! At this moment a kunai with a detonation charm was shot towards him from behind. Kakashi easily avoided the kunai and destroyed the detonation charm tied to it with the Chidori. The ninja who threw the kunai was hiding behind a tree frowned as the expected explosion didn't occur. The moment he poked out his head to see the reason, a kunai wrapped in thunder chakra pierced through his head, killing him instantly before he could even react. On Guy's side. Sixth gate, came on, open. After opening the sixth gate of Hashiman Tanku, Guy's body was wrapped up in a greenish aura as the surrounding leaves and gravel flew away or hovered in the air from the sheer pressure he emanated. The Kumo ninjas who surrounded Guy looked at each other in wonder. Initially, they all thought that they could easily complete the task of killing this Umbu. After all, according to the information they have of the members of Umbu Team 11, only Hatake Kakashi, Uchiha Shursui, and Hyuga Kuroto are worth noting, while the miscellaneous fourth member of the team is just a tail of the crane, nothing to be taken seriously. But the scene here is clearly contrary to what is shown in the intelligence. Glancing at the dazzling golden light shining on the horizon, Guy who was wearing a monkey mask shouted, "My companions are all fighting for the safety of the village, I can't stay behind any longer." Some of the Kumo ninjas were offended by Guy's words and shouted angrily, "Boy, are you underestimating us?" Guy obviously didn't bother to answer, just jumped into the air with a distinctive stance and shouted, "Morning Peacock." And instantly he started punching in the air repeatedly. The speed of his punches was so fast that they were set ablaze by sheer speed and friction, which in turn created a peacock-like fan of flames fired towards the Kumo ninjas. The Kumo could hardly react to the fan of flames, and one by one they all flew out or burnt by the attacks. After solving all the enemy at his end, Guy took a breath to relieve himself and vanished in the direction of the golden light. On Kuroto's side. Kuroto continued easily dodging the barrage of punches that Shinichi threw at him with the four massive arms of his Susanoo. Boom. 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 Each punch, when collided with the ground, caused a massive earthquake and shook the entire forest. But Kuroto wasn't just dodging. Whenever he got the right opportunity, he would wave his golden chakra sword to cut off Susanoo. He was also very careful so that his sword doesn't cut through Shinichi or the Manjikyu Sharingan, because he doesn't want to destroy the Manjikyu Sharingan. But because Shinichi's offensive was increasing continuously, so it was getting a little difficult for Kuroto to make sure that his attacks don't damage Manjikyu Sharingan. Roar. With a wailing cry, the Susanoo whose head was cut off by Kuroto disappeared. And Shinichi, who was almost going crazy because nothing he did worked, in frustration, he once again summoned the Susanoo while wiping away the blood that spurted out of his mouth. Damn it, this is already the 5th time he has summoned the Susanoo. Is he some sort of Jinchuriki? Where is he getting so much chakra from? Although Kuroto was still calm, he still started to feel doubtful. The two sides have yet not fought for too long, but in this short battle, Kuroto has already destroyed the Susanoo summoned by Shinichi 4 times already. Shinichi should definitely be exhausted by now. But every time Kuroto destroys the Susanoo with the golden sword, Shinichi is again able to summon the Susanoo, and even if that's the case, why has his chakra not dropped? This fact really bugged Kuroto. It seems that my initial guess is wrong. His Manjikyu Sharingan ability is not as simple as postponing the injury. Damn, the Manjikyu Sharingan abilities are all really broken, none of them could be simple. Ho, is the fight fierce to such an extent? Looking at the golden light that dazzled from time to time at the horizon along with the loud rumbling sounds that echoed in his ears, White Zetsu's clone was really surprised at this moment. Because the main body and the masked man are constraining the main pursuit unit led by Shimura Danzo in the surrounding forest of Konoha, therefore only he and some other clones were responsible for monitoring and keeping track of Uchiha Shinichi. But unfortunately, the masked man and Zetsu didn't take Shinichi's perception ability into account, which led to most of them being killed by Shinichi, leaving only him in this area. Ever since awakening the Manjikyu Sharingan, Shinichi's perception has far surpassed the level of an elite sensor team, therefore, it is very difficult for Zetsu's clone to get close to Shinichi, as the guy will most likely notice him too. Zetsu clone has already confirmed this several times during the follow-up along the way, so at this time, he didn't dare to get too close to the battlefield and was only observing it from far away, therefore, he wasn't aware of the specific situation on the battlefield. Can't let him die. The fierce battle happening there is far beyond his expectations, and in order to ensure that no accident happens to Uchiha Shinichi, Zetsu's clone decided to take the risk and get closer after a little hesitation. Coming out of the ground, he jumped onto a big tree to have a higher elevation so as to increase his field of vision for a clear view. Wouch! 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 The moment he landed on the canopy of the tree, several iron spears rained upon him from all directions. What happened? Even before White Zetsu could react, he was nailed to the tree trunk with all the iron spears. White Zetsu, who was restricted, noticed that some of the iron spears were wrapped in detonation charms. Boom. Oops. That was his last thought as he was drowned in a series of explosions. Boom. Boom. As the explosions subsided after a few seconds, the Sandaime Kazekage puppet that has been watching over Kuroto while flying high in the sky, examined the wreckage to confirm that the White Zetsu clone was indeed destroyed. Since Team 11 departed for the mission, the Sandaime puppet has been continuously flying in the air to watch over the team and take care of all the snoopers. Obviously, Kuroto has confirmed that Shinichi has been in contact with Obito, so Kuroto would naturally take measures against Zetsu's intelligence gathering. So even when he is fighting with Shinichi, Kuroto made sure to not neglect to keep watch over the surroundings, and precisely because of this, he was able to perceive the presence of White Zetsu trying to observe their battle. And Kuroto would obviously not let him do that. When Zetsu is merged with the ground, he is able to perceive and spy on chakra reaction and emission through the conduction of earth, so it is difficult to catch him, but when he is above the ground, his sensing ability is not good enough to protect against air attacks. Therefore, he wasn't aware of the Kazekage puppet that was lurking in the air, and as soon as he got out of the ground, he was killed before he even had any time to react or check out who the enemy is. On Kuroto's side, the battle between him and Shinichi continued. Through his careful observations, Kuroto discovered that Shinichi can not only undo his injuries but can even constantly maintain his chakra volume and pupil power even after his Susanoo has been repeatedly destroyed by Kuroto. It is impossible to constantly maintain chakra volume if his Manjikyu Sharingan ability allows him to only heal injuries or postpone them into the future. Thinking of this, Kuroto again recalled the description of Uchiha Kurumi's death. The girl he loved died in his arms, but he was powerless to do anything, even if he tried. Based on this, I initially thought that the Manjikyu Sharingan ability he awakened would somehow be related to healing, but now it seems that the keyword here is not healing, but protecting or guarding, probably. Guarding is obviously very different from healing. From this, more guesses can be derived, and Kuroto thinks that Uchiha Shinichi's Manjikyu Sharingan ability gives him a locked state in which there is some guardian effect. As long as he is in this state, no matter how many injuries he gets, and no matter how much chakra he consumes, his state will continue to keep him in his peak form, so that he can continue fighting. But how long does that state last is difficult to infer, and it's even hard to guess that whether he would even go blind while he is in this state. But it is still a Manjikyu Sharingan ability, so it must depend on his Manjikyu Sharingan, and there has to be some way to break through it. After roughly analyzing this, Kuroto thought of two methods to break through it. First is that there is probably a time limit to how long this state lasts. As long as that time passes, it should be possible to subdue him unless he activates that state again. The second is that there must be an upper limit to how much damage the Guardian can restore. If the total damage inflicted upon him exceeds the upper limit, then it should be possible to subdue Shinichi. Of course, both of these possibilities are only limited to Kuroto's guesses. Whether they are really true or not, have to be verified. Up until now, Kuroto was continuously holding back so as to not damage the Manjikyu Sharingan in Shinichi's sockets. But now he feels that the more restrained he is, the longer will the battle continue, and he won't even be able to do anything to Uchiha Shinichi considering Shinichi's possible eye ability, so now he will be changing his approach and use more of his strength to make a quick decision. As for whether Shinichi's Manjikyu Sharingan will remain intact, Kuroto will leave that to Shinichi's luck. After making up his mind, Kuroto immediately flashed and rushed towards the Susanoo armor, and pierced the golden sword through the Susanoo. The target this time was directly Shinichi. Boom! With an exploding sound, Susanoo's armor broke to pieces and his body was directly cut in half by the golden sword. Shinichi, whose body fell into two parts on the ground, coughed up blood and murmured, "So fast." While Kuroto was watching Shinichi's recovery intently, he distractingly sensed the surroundings. Kuroto was able to sense many chakra reactions rushing towards him, and these chakra signatures included the familiar ones of the Team 11, as well as unfamiliar ones. "Can't delay any longer," Kuroto muttered with a frowning expression. At this time, a line of blood tears came out of Shinichi's eyes, and a whole new lower half sprouted from his upper body. Kuroto was obviously shocked seeing this scene. It can recover such a degree of damage. He thought in shock. This type of recovery is as amazing as to how Jubi Madara easily recovered from Death Gate Guy's final attack. Moreover, the whole process didn't even take a second, and when he recovered there was not even any decrease in his chakra level. Sure enough, Manjikyu Sharingan's abilities are all cheats on their own. Shinichi, who was back to his peak, didn't attack immediately this time but blurted out in a confused tone, how could Hachiman's time decrease so much at once? According to Shinichi's guess, his peak state should have continued for at least 5 more minutes, but after being directly cut in half by that golden sword, this time limit has decreased by so much. Ruling out all the possible scenarios, Shinichi's gaze finally landed on the golden sword in Kuroto's hand, and asked, just what kind of ninjutsu is that golden sword in your hand, Hyuga Kuroto? Kuroto didn't bother answering, he just raised his arm to again cut Shinichi in half with the golden sword, as he wants to test the limits of Shinichi's Manjikyu ability. But just as he was about to slash, Shinichi figure staggered and then fell on the ground and lost consciousness. Kuroto's expression shrank and he immediately checked Shinichi's state with his Tenseigan. Kuroto was able to notice that Shinichi's chakra level severely fell from his peak state to the bare minimum necessary for survival. His guardian state has disappeared, muttered Kuroto as he slowly landed on the ground after deactivating the Tenseigan chakra mode. Since Shinichi was now unconscious, so after a moment of thinking, Kuroto created a shadow clone and immediately left the battlefield while carrying unconscious Shinichi. After a while, since Kuroto's main body left, Shursui, who has activated his Susanoo, arrived here first. Looking at the plain that used to be a dense forest before, Shursui was obviously shocked, but at the same time not so much since he has already seen a much shocking scene, and soon his eyes fell upon Kuroto's shadow clone, who was standing idly in the middle of the battlefield, and he dashed forward. Rushing towards Kuroto, Shursui asked hurriedly, Kuroto-san, where is Shinichi? The shadow clone just shook his head and answered, he escaped. Learning that Shinichi wasn't at least dead, Shursui breathed a sigh of relief and then asked again, where did he escape? I will chase after high dash. Even before Shursui could finish his words, more than a dozen figures surrounded them at the messy battlefield. By their dress code alone, one could judge that all of them were Kumo ninjas led by Yujito Ni. Kumo ninjas all took a breath of shock as they looked at the battlefield that was a complete wreck in front of them. No one could imagine just how fierce the battle might have been that turned the entire forest area into what it is now. Noticing that there was no sign of Uchiha Shinichi's presence in this area, Yujito Ni was a little disappointed and asked tentatively from Kuroto, where is Uchiha Shinichi, did you kill him? Kuroto's shadow clone indifferently looked at her and said coldly, why should I answer you? This is Konoha's internal matter, and doesn't have anything to do with Kumo. As soon as Kuroto's cold voice fell, one after another the figure of Guy and Kakashi landed on the side, ready for battle against Kumo. Now the scene turned into the 4 members of Team 11 standing in confrontation against Yujito Ni and the Kumo team led by her. Inside a cave far away from the battlefield. With an intense headache, Uchiha Shinichi, who has been unconscious, slowly woke up with a tired expression. After clearing his eyes, he realized that he was inside an unknown cave and was suddenly alert because this isn't where he should have been. In the alert state, he tried getting up only to fall back as he didn't have enough strength to be able to do so. At this time a voice sounded from the side, you shouldn't get up immediately, you haven't recovered any chakra, moreover, you are still quite exhausted. Looking in the direction from where the voice came, Shinichi saw Hyuga Kuroto, who was standing indifferently while leisurely leaning against the opposite wall with his arms over his chest. Contrary to what Kuroto expected, not only Shinichi didn't panic as soon as he saw him but simply stated, this means I lose again, huh? I really am pathetic. Alright, if you want to kill me, do it, because I am not going to beg for mercy if that's what you are hoping for. Not caring about what Shinichi said, Kuroto questioned calmly, tell me the detail of your Manjikyu Sharingan ability. Humph, as if I would. Shinichi snorted coldly and became silent. Kuroto didn't care about Shinichi's attitude, just asked casually, so, do you choose death now? Just like this, don't you regret it? It seems that Shinichi was suddenly agitated by Kuroto's words, and shouted as tears came out of his eyes, so, what do you expect me to do? Destroy the entire Konoha village? Kill every last one of the Konoha shinobi? And then finally die in some battle? Curling his lips, Kuroto said with a smirk, you should know that the root ninja who killed Uchiha Kurumi was being manipulated, right? I know, but does that change anything? He is still the one who killed Kurumi, how can I let him stay alive? Everyone involved with Kurumi's death must die. Shouted Shinichi with a hoarse voice. So, you should kill me now, because if you don't, then sooner or later I am going to come after Konoha. Ignoring Shinichi's tears, Kuroto asked indifferently, aren't you curious about who is the person pulling all the strings behind the scenes is? With a deep sigh, Shinichi's gaze hardened, and he said with a firm voice, I know who it is, and after destroying Konoha, I will go after him. This time Kuroto was surprised by Shinichi's words. Initially, he thought that Shinichi might not know who the person behind the scenes is, but unexpectedly, Shinichi is aware of this and even has that masked man as his goal for revenge. Now this was interesting, thought Kuroto with a smirk at this info. In fact, now Kuroto should even be thankful to Obito for giving him a possible chess piece that has his hatred directed towards Obito. All Kuroto has to do now is to induce Shinichi to join him, and then things would start. Looking at Kuroto's smirk, Shinichi shouted, "If you don't kill me now, I will make sure to kill all of you sooner or later, so stop asking such nonsense questions and just do it already. Dying in your hands would at least not be so bad. Kill, kill, kill. Is that all you can think of?" With a deliberate snort, Kuroto continued, "Isn't it just a girl? What's such a big deal about it? Instead of thinking of dying, shouldn't you look for methods to bring her back to you?" Shinichi was angered at Kuroto's words and shouted, "Don't mock her death. I have already searched everything I could. There is no such method even in the secret scrolls of the Uchiha clan. If you can return Kurumi to me, I will give you anything." While holding his chin in a thinking posture, Kuroto asked with interest, "Who? Supposedly I do bring her back to life. What can you give me?" Shinichi was left speechless when he thought of his identity as a missing nin, and after a little consideration, he finally said, "As long as you bring Kurumi back to me, I will give you my Manjikyu Sharingan." Kuroto was a little surprised by this statement. "Are you willing to give away your Manjikyu Sharingan for her?" Shinichi was obviously annoyed by this question and argued in a frustrated tone, "Are you serious? Compared to her, what is the worth of just a Manjikyu Sharingan? If she can come back to life, I am willing to give away anything." After pondering a little, Kuroto finally said, "In fact, it is not impossible to resurrect Uchiha Kurumi, but why should I bring her back? Why should I help you? If it's just your Manjikyu Sharingan, I can have it after I kill you, not like you can either run away or defeat me in your current state, can you?" Kuroto said all this, but Shinichi ignored most of the part as he too knew that Hyuga Kuroto could have done that if he wanted, but focused on the more important words, can you, really bring Kurumi back to life?" Kuroto nodded. There is indeed a perfect method to resurrect a person, but it is costly, and again the question arises, just why should I use that power to bring her back to life? Kuroto is obviously not sure whether the Tenseigan has the ability to bring the dead back to life as he still hasn't explored the Tenseigan Dojutsu enough to understand this, but he does know that the Rinnegan is capable of such a feat, as Rinnegan can perfectly resurrect a person. After all, Nagato was able to resurrect so many of Konoha shinobi. Shinichi immediately became excited listening to Kuroto's statement, and even though he shouldn't be able to move based on the chakra depletion, he still got up and kneeled before Kuroto with his forehead on the ground and stated, "Whatever you want, I promise you anything, my Manjikyu Sharingan, whether it is to kill anyone, even my life, I will give you everything. As long as you bring back Kurumi to me, I will do everything for you, I promise, please." After pondering a little, Kuroto, who has already made up his mind with what he wants, stated clearly, "What I want is your loyalty, and your service. After 15 years of servitude, I will resurrect Uchiha Kurumi." Even before Kuroto can complete his sentence, Shinichi immediately promised without thinking, "Alright, I promise you." Even Kuroto was a little dazed at just how fast Shinichi agreed and said, "Don't agree so quickly, first listen to what I want you to do in these 15 years, your first assignment is to join the organization that murderer of Kurumi is part of, as my spy." Akatsuki's control over its core members is actually very limited as all of them are more or less Kage class people. Orochimaru was able to successfully leave the organization, so having Shinichi as an undercover in the Akatsuki is not impossible. Shinichi's identity as a missing nin helps a lot in this matter, especially the fact that this was all planned by Obito, so in this regard, Obito wouldn't be suspicious of Shinichi. And that's what Kuroto wants. Shinichi was highly surprised and asked in shock, "What? You want me to join his organization?" Kuroto didn't bother explaining the ins and out of the matter, just stated flatly, "He should have invited you to join his organization, right? I need information on that organization, and your first assignment will be to join that organization as my spy." The current actions Obito took are already very different from the original story. From these alone, the direction of the plot has started to deviate more and more from what Kuroto remembers. Therefore, his knowledge of the future would soon become less and less useful, and sometimes his actions to maintain the plot might even backfire, which Kuroto can't afford to have, so instead of wasting his time to keep the plot in check, Kuroto would rather use other means to have an advantage over others. This is why he needs a spy in the Akatsuki organization, to have a grasp over their real-time movements and goals. After all, Kuroto can't leave such dangerous people like Obito and Pain, without any check. And what better candidate for this job than Shinichi? Various reasons make Shinichi the perfect candidate for this job. First is that all the events surrounding Shinichi's defection have been initiated by Obito, so in a sense, Shinichi is just a chess piece that Obito cultivated, therefore, he would be less wary of Shinichi. The second is that, Shinichi is already strong enough to be a high-tier member of the Akatsuki, so it will be easier for him to gather intelligence on their movements. The third is that Shinichi defected after killing many of the Root and Umbu ninjas, so there wouldn't be that much worry about him being a spy. The fourth is that Kuroto can be sure that Shinichi wouldn't betray him, as long as Kuroto keeps his word, so Kuroto doesn't have to worry about Shinichi's loyalty getting out of hand. At this time Shinichi said with a little hesitation, I'm not sure if I'll be a good spy. I am worried that I wouldn't be able to restrain my anger when I see that masked man and he will see through my facade. This statement made Kuroto smirk. This is the final reason. Uchiha Shinichi isn't an idiot. He may be arrogant, emotional, and a little annoying, but Shinichi is definitely not dumb, so this makes him one of the current best candidate if you don't count Itachi. Crossing his arms over his chest, Kuroto said with a smile, yes, that's why you would be the perfect candidate. How come? Shinichi asked in confusion. It's very simple actually. You just don't need to cover your hatred towards him, you don't need to deliberately suppress yourself, in fact, you can even attack him whenever you see him, that will only make him believe that you are not a spy, and he would, in fact, drop his guard against you. Shinichi asked in confusion, why? Initially, Kuroto wanted to say, because you are both crazy and idiots, but looking at Shinichi's serious look, Kuroto changed his words, because both of you are Uchiha. As expected he is also an Uchiha, but aren't you afraid that I'll kill him, if I do attack him, that is? Kuroto sighed at this sentence and muttered in his heart, if only it was that simple. I have awakened the Tenseigan, and I am sure that I still can't kill him. Shaking his head, Kuroto answered Shinichi, I mean even if you do attack him, he won't suspect you to be a spy, but I recommend not doing so as you still don't have any means to kill him. Cough cough. Shinichi wanted to argue at Kuroto's blunt statement, but before he could speak, he spurted blood. Kuroto frowned when he saw this happen and asked while narrowing his eye, what's happening to you? While continuing to cough out more and more blood, Shinichi waved his hand towards Kuroto to indicate that he was alright. Seeing all this happening, Kuroto's expression became more and more serious. This is because Kuroto was able to see that Shinichi's chakra was getting weaker by the second and there are no signs of stopping. Not only that, Kuroto even felt that Shinichi's vitality is also declining, it feels unclear but there is no doubt about it. Puff. However, before they could do anything, a cloud of blood burst out of Shinichi's chest. Immediately afterward, several sword marks started to appear over his chest and arms, with obvious bluish-purple traces, indicating the presence of toxins within them. At a glance, Kuroto recognized them as the spread of the paralytic poison he concocted and used on his Kusanagi sword. That's the paralytic effect, muttered Kuroto with a thoughtful look. The injuries that started to appear on Shinichi's body are obviously the ones that Kuroto inflicted him with, in their previous battle. This undoubtedly shows that Shinichi's guardian state has been lifted and they seem to all appear at once on his body. Then Kuroto thought of the fact that how he slashed Shinichi's body into two halves with the Golden Will reincarnation explosion, and frowned, he wouldn't die just like this, right? However, Kuroto's worries were soon becoming a reality, as sword wounds started to appear on his chest. Very soon, these cuts spread up to his waist, and finally, his body started being divided into upper and lower fragments. Kuroto hurriedly ran towards Shinichi, to try to save him, but looking at Shinichi's body that was already divided into two parts, Kuroto wasn't able to do anything for a while. At this moment, a bloody tear flowed out of Shinichi's other eye. Seeing this tear, Kuroto was slightly surprised. Immediately activating his Tenseigan, Kuroto looked at Shinichi's state. Uchiha Shinichi, who should have already been dead because of his body dividing into two parts, didn't die, but in fact, recovered to his previous state in the blink of an eye. If it was someone else, maybe they wouldn't have noticed anything, but in that brief moment, when his body has divided into two halves to the moment he recovered, Kuroto noticed many details, and just one thought flashed in his mind. This is not recovery or regeneration, it's actually backflow of time. Kuroto keenly noticed that the recovery of Shinichi's all the wounds happened in the exact opposite order of their appearance, and the recovery also happened as if the clock was turning back. This is simply the backflow of time, not just regeneration. It didn't take long for Shinichi to recover to his peak state, and if it weren't for the shocking presence of all the blood that was still present on the ground, Kuroto might even suspect that the scene that happened before him wasn't true. Recovering from his shock, Kuroto asked Shinichi with a curious expression. Your Manjikyu Sharingan ability is related to time? Shinichi, who was slightly pale due to blood loss, nodded and said with slight weakness, the ability of my left Manjikyu is called Hachiman. It's a guardian ability that will maintain my peak condition for a certain period of time, and all the injuries and chakra depletion I suffer in this period will become worthless in that time frame, and finally break out later when the ability is deactivated. Kuroto nodded in understanding and said, as I guessed, but what you just used a few seconds before was the ability of your right eye, wasn't it? Shinichi covered his right eye and said with some pain he was feeling, the ability of my right is called Nakasawame. It's sort of a resident time house, and it allows me to revert the flow of time. Seriously. Both of them are too much of cheat ability, and more so when combined together. This was Kuroto's thought when he heard the description of Shinichi's Manjikyu abilities. After thinking a little, Kuroto asked, you just used the ability of your right Manjikyu Sharingan to revert back the flow of time and then remove those injuries you suffered from the normal time flow, right? Shinichi glanced at Kuroto with a helpless expression, as he said weakly, I didn't expect you to see through it in just one glance. After getting his confirmation, Kuroto pointed at the ground and asked in confusion, if that's the case then what's the matter with all the blood? If you are reversing time and removing your injuries from the normal time flow, shouldn't this blood also return back to you? Shaking his head, Shinichi said with a saddened expression, the power of Nakasawame only acts on me once something is out of my chakra range, i.e., the blood has flowed out of my body, my ability wouldn't affect it. This is also the reason I couldn't bring the dead back to life with this ability. Kuroto nodded in understanding, no wonder we saw a lot of those bloodstains in a tree cave before. It turns out those bandages weren't used to wrap the wounds but to prevent the blood from flowing out of your body. Hachiman can distort all the injuries and chakra loss suffered by a person at a point for a certain duration, and a Nakasawame can completely remove that accumulated damage from the timeline by the backflow of time. When used in conjunction, these two abilities make a perfect match. Sighing at just how much of a cheat all the known Manjikyu Sharingan abilities are, Kuroto can't help but think, probably the presence of the small amount of six-path chakra in the Sharingan makes it possible for Manjikyu Sharingan to awaken such unreasonable techniques. The six-path chakra somehow gives birth to such abilities with conjunctions to the awakener's thought process and emotions at the time of awakening by giving it life through yin-yang release, or creation of all things to be more specific. Now, it's not that the Uchiha have mastery over yin-yang release, but maybe that's how the abilities of the Manjikyu Sharingan works, well, in theory at least. But how that whole process works? Kuroto isn't sure about it. But anyway, the possible abilities that Kuroto thought that Shinichi might have awakened weren't that far from his guess, only a little superior to what he expected them to be. At the same time, their limit is also what he expected, as long as the damage afflicted upon him is higher than what could be sustained by Hachiman, the consumption rate of the wear down of this ability would increase, and this is the only possible method to break through this ability, and that too unless Shinichi learns to use both of his abilities in conjunction. But when Kuroto was thinking all these things, one thing still bugged him a little, as he asked in confusion, since you know that the blood loss cannot be reversed, why didn't you take any precaution to avoid losing too much blood, even in the worst-case scenario? While still covering his right eye, Shinichi answered lightly, this time the burst of damage was all too sudden, most probably due to some sort of corrosion from your jutsu. I didn't expect you to be able to do that, most probably that interfered with the working of my technique which significantly reduced the time limit, otherwise I would have prepared everything. After listening to this answer, Kuroto thought to himself, it turns out that Golden Will reincarnation explosion played a role in influencing his time limit, as I expected. That's why you can't take any attack from the truth-seeking orbs without any damage. Yin-yang release is also cheap. While Kuroto was busy analyzing this, Shinichi, who was on the side covering his right eye, suddenly yelled in pain. Now, what's wrong with you? Asked Kuroto with a frowning expression. My eyes, it's my eyes, they hurt so much, shit. Damn it, shouted Shinichi while covering his as he rolled on the ground in pain. How can this happen? Why do my eyes hurt so much? Bear with it for a while, it should calm down soon enough. Said Kuroto lightly, after a little bit of thinking. And just as Kuroto said, after a while, Shinichi shouts gradually calmed down, and he asked while taking heavy breaths, do you know what's going on? Why do my eyes sting so much? It felt as if hundreds of needles are being poked into them. It's probably because of overuse of Manjikyu Sharingan. After all, these eyes aren't that stable, the more you use them, the faster you will get blind. Said Kuroto after a little bit of thinking. What? Shinichi was shocked by this sudden information. What? I thought you knew these basic things. After a short pause, Kuroto continued speaking, if you didn't know, then make sure to understand this now, make sure to not heavily rely on the Manjikyu Sharingan. But if that happens, my power will get heavily limited, isn't there some way to avoid going blind? Shinichi asked in a slightly worried tone. Kuroto was now in a dilemma, he was seriously considering whether to really tell Shinichi or not about the method to cure the blindness, but after a little thinking, he decided to tell this. After all, Shinichi is going to learn this sooner or later anyway. As far as I know up to now, there are two methods, you should be aware of one of them, about the tales of how Uchiha Madara took away the eyes of his younger brother to regain his light. Well, there have been such stories that have circulated within the Uchiha clan, but what's that got to do with this? Don't tell me it's actually true. I don't know the specifics, but based on those stories, we can infer that one can probably gain eternal light by transplanting the eyes of your closest blood relatives, provided they too are Manjikyu Sharingan, in which case, Madara's younger brother for him, to gain a Manjikyu Sharingan that would never go blind, that is the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan. But my parents died in the Third Shinobi War, and I also don't have any sibling or any other close blood relatives, and even if there are, I won't take away their eyes. In that case, the second method could be used on you, which is to gain a high amount of yang chakra. The best method to do this is by the transplantation of Hashirama cells, to gain certain characteristics of Sage Body that will help you to revitalize your lost pupil power and cure the blindness, at the same time also has other passive benefits. I get that and all, but there is one thing that has been bugging me for a while now. How come you, a Hyuga, know all these things about Sharingan, Manjikyu Sharingan, and Uchiha clan, that even I, an Uchiha doesn't know of? Asked Shinichi with a curious look. His question was more than valid, after all, Hyuga Kuroto is of the Hyuga clan, it wouldn't be strange if Kuroto knew all these secrets if they belonged to the Hyuga clan, but they don't, and being a non-Uchiha, how come he knows about all these? Kuroto. Seeing Kuroto's silence, Shinichi sighed. It's fine if you don't want to tell. I mean, it's not like it's that important anyway. Kuroto nodded in appreciation, he really doesn't have any accurate response for this. The reason Kuroto chose to give all this information to Shinichi is that he will most probably learn about it from Obito during his time in the Akatsuki organization. So, letting Shinichi know of this information in advance will only bring some more points for Kuroto in Shinichi's books. Well, you don't have to worry about going blind or anything, as long as you keep to your words and continue passing me some intelligence about the movement of that organization. I'll make sure that you don't go blind, because I can't have a useful combat personnel losing all his combat power, but make sure to do some sort of training that will decrease your dependency on your visual senses while in combat, this will definitely help you. Alright, I guess I'll believe it if it's you. Shinichi nodded after a little bit of thinking. Shinichi was already convinced of Kuroto's strength because he understood that even when fighting against him, who was using the Manjikyu Sharingan, Hyuga Kuroto was holding back, so there is some sort of faith Shinichi has in Kuroto. If anyone really has the ability to resurrect a person, then Hyuga Kuroto might actually have such power, and based on what Kuroto said up to now, even if he doesn't at this point maybe he will in the future. So, betting on Kuroto is not without benefit. While going through all these thoughts, Kuroto finally said, alright, with that out of the way, the name of the organization that I want you to join is called the Akatsuki. 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 Don't be too arrogant or careless after you join this organization, it's filled with people you might as well consider as true monsters in their own right, and just for example, even the snake Sannin Orochimaru is also a part of this organization. Shinichi was highly surprised by this piece of information, someone like Orochimaru would choose to join some no-name organization. Like most of Konoha shinobi, Shinichi obviously only has the 5 great shinobi villages in his eyes, the rest are just some small bunches that can't be taken seriously. But this thought is too wrong because Akatsuki is nothing like that. As I said, don't underestimate them. This organization has more than enough power to destroy any shinobi village with little ease. The combined strength of this organization is more than enough to overpower any shinobi village, even Konoha for all that matter, and it will actually take the combined effort of all the shinobi villages to get rid of them. So, don't take them lightly, I don't want you to use your eyes on the first day you join them. Seeing the serious look on Kuroto's face, Shinichi gulped slightly. The front leader of Akatsuki is a person who is said to have awakened the mythical Rinnegan eyes. After a short pause, Kuroto continued, Rinnegan is one of 3 great dojutsu, aside from the Sharingan and the Byakugan, and is also said to be the eyes of the sage of the 6th path from the legends foretold in the shinobi world. So, make sure to not take him lightly or provoke him. The Rinnegan? Shinichi asked in awe as he didn't believe that something like the Rinnegan actually existed. But if Kuroto is saying that is the case, then it might just be, wait. You said that the leader of this organization. Isn't the bastard responsible for killing Kurumi the leader? That's a little confusing, I'll leave it to you to figure it out for yourself during your stay in Akatsuki. Kuroto spoke in an amusing tone. As for his true identity, it's better that you try to figure that out for yourself by your own methods. I understand. Shinichi nodded in understanding. Finally glancing at Shinichi, Kuroto tentatively asked, that's all well and good, but what are you going to do if that masked man says that he can also bring Uchiha Kurumi back to life? Shinichi answered coldly without any thinking, I'll obviously not believe a single word that bastard says. But what if he really could? What if he really had the ability to bring Uchiha Kurumi back to life? This time Shinichi was stunned when he heard Kuroto's question, and immediately said, if you are worried that I'll betray you for that, then don't be. As long as you don't break your word, I will not betray you. As long as you bring Kurumi back to life, I won't be swayed by any of his temptations. Kuroto didn't reply directly but stared at Shinichi intently. Seeing Kuroto's look, Shinichi turned his face to the side with a blushing look. Don't look at me so intently, I am not into men. If you stare so much at me, I'll start feeling insecure about my chastity. Cough cough. Don't talk bullshit, I am straight, also you know I have a fiancé, right? Well, I do, but who knows if you have some eccentric habits, you know what I mean. Shinichi said while giving a strange look at Kuroto from the side. Listening to Shinichi's words, Kuroto had an unamused look, as he stared at Shinichi with really, expression. Sigh, geez, lighten up a little. Anyway, jokes aside, I am not a fool. From the moment the masked man made use of Kurumi as if she is nothing more than a pawn whose sole role is to die for me to awaken my Manjikyu Sharingan, any room for negotiations between me and him was over. It is simply impossible for me to not hate him, therefore, I would never be able to trust him in bringing Kurumi back to life. Besides, even if he did, he might do something extra and add some sort of jutsu to Kurumi's body that would leave me with no choice but to act as his puppet, therefore, I won't trust him with something so important. There is simply no possibility for that happening. Kuroto nodded in understanding and chose to believe this explanation. Alright, that satisfies me. Next, tell me the identity of the Kumo spy lurking in Konoha that made contact with you? This time Shinichi shook his head and stated, I don't know the identity of the other party. I didn't meet him personally, he made contact with me through a summon beast, that's a small sparrow, and all the messages were sent using that little bird. In fact, I didn't even trust his words, and my defection had nothing to do with him, even the matter of calling the Kumo shinobi in the land of fire was initially unknown to me. Kuroto's face sank when he heard this. So, you don't have a method to get in contact with him? Asked Kuroto. I am afraid not. Shinichi said while shaking his head in denial. Sigh, forget it then. Kuroto said helplessly. Although Kuroto guessed that the Kumo spy lurking in Konoha would definitely not reveal his identity so easily, even to Uchiha Shinichi for that matter, he was still a little disappointed when Shinichi said this. Alright, then tell me the location where you buried Uchiha Kurumi? Kuroto asked inattentively. Why do you want to know that? Shinichi asked with a vigilant look. Seriously? You are asking me this? Kuroto again asked with a really look. Suddenly Shinichi remembered that Kuroto promised to bring Kurumi back to life and answered while rubbing the back of his head with an embarrassing laugh, ha ha ha, sorry. I buried her in a cave in the lower reaches of the Naka River, no one in the Uchiha clan or village knows of this other than me. Kuroto nodded and said, now tell me the specific location. This time Shinichi realized that something was up and asked worriedly, are you worried about something? I have already told you not to underestimate the methods of the Akatsuki. After a short pause, Kuroto continued, if by some chance, the masked man found and took out her body, I won't be able to do anything. Since the matter was related to the resurrection of Uchiha Kurumi, so he understood the seriousness of Kuroto's words and without being any more careless, Shinichi quickly described the specific location of Kurumi's grave and then added, you must not let Kurumi's body fall into their hands. After learning the location of Uchiha Kurumi's grave, Kuroto thought a little and said, it's not very safe here, take care of all the traces and change the site to recover. This cave, although a little hidden, isn't very far from the battlefield where the two of them fought. Once Konoha or Kumo learns that Uchiha Shinichi disappeared/ran away from the battlefield, a carpet search will inevitably begin, and finding this cave wouldn't be very difficult, so neither of the two can stay here for very long. Shinichi nodded and immediately used a fireball jutsu on the place where the blood was left. After being burned violently by the fireball jutsu, all the blood evaporated, leaving only black traces, and nothing more. On the battlefield, the silent confrontation between Team 11 and Kyumo Shinobi continued, and neither side rushed to make the first move. Both sides were afraid for a reason to make the first attack. Team 11 as a whole wasn't afraid of the overall power of the Kyumo unit led by Yujito, but they were worried that the fight might again light the fuse of an all-out war between the two villages, so they were somewhat restrained. On the Kyumo side, Yujito learned and personally witnessed the fact that the Umbu in the cat mask, i.e., Uchiha Shursui, based on the information published in the bingo book, seems to also have awakened the Manjikyu Sharingan, and then there is Hyuga Kuroto, the guy with the eagle mask, seem to have defeated Uchiha Shinichi, who has awakened the Manjikyu Sharingan, so fighting these four Umbu seems a little difficult for her. After all, they are still in the land of fire, i.e., enemy territory, and it wouldn't take very much long for the Konoha Shinobi army, personally, led by the Toad Sannin Jiraiya, to arrive here. And once these reinforcements arrive, the already low chances of winning will even disappear completely. Bang! While Yujito was considering whether to stay and fight or retreat, a red flare appeared in the distant sky signaling the arrival. One of the Kyumo Jonin who was part of the unit approached Yujito and whispered silently, "It's Konoha's flare, it's time we retreat." Sighing heavily at the fact that Team 11 was again spared from her clutches, Yujito nodded towards the Jonin and ordered, "Retreat." Following Yujito order, all the Kyumo ninjas took a backward step and started leaving the battlefield. Whoosh! 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 Finally giving a cold glance to the four members of Team 11, who still didn't drop their guard, she too retreated. Whoosh! All the Kyumo ninjas turned into afterimages and soon disappeared in the darkening night towards the direction of the land of hot water. Phew! Kakashi finally breathed a sigh of relief. He really didn't want the matter to escalate anymore. While Kakashi was glad, Shursui asked Kuroto anxiously, "Kuroto-san, which direction did Shinichi escape?" Kuroto's clone didn't look at Shursui, just answered calmly, "Don't be too anxious, let's first wait for Jiraiya-sama's arrival and then decide the further course of action." Understanding that the reinforcements brought by Jiraiya were about to arrive, Shursui suppressed his anxiousness to chase after Shinichi. After all, pursuing after Uchiha Shinichi in the night and this dense forest would be extremely difficult, not to mention his anti-tracking abilities would only make it more difficult. Without making them wait for long, the Toad Sannin Jiraiya arrived at the battlefield along with the reinforcements. He was quite surprised looking at the scale of damage and the messy battlefield. Kakashi hurriedly stepped forwards and reported the basic situation about the battle to Jiraiya and finally stated, after Uchiha Shinichi's fight with Eagle, he is currently missing. Jiraiya glanced towards Kuroto's clone, and after looking at him from head to toe, he said with a smile, "Hey young guy, we meet again." Kuroto was a little speechless as to how to respond to that greeting. Jiraiya also noticed the confusion and waved his hand, while stating, "Don't worry, aside from your details in the bingo book, the old man has already given me some basic information of the members of Team 11, so don't be too restrained." Kuroto nodded and bowed towards Jiraiya as a sign of his gratefulness. "I am still grateful for Jiraiya-sama's help from that time." The arrival of Jiraiya and Orochimaru helped Kuroto and Itachi and prompted Yujito to retreat during their mission. If not for the arrival of the two Sannin, the consequences of the accidental encounter with the Nibi's Jinchuriki might have been quite disastrous. Jiraiya casually nodded and asked, "Tell me the details of your fight with Uchiha Shinichi." Kuroto will of course not give an accurate description of the battle between him and Shinichi, so he just vaguely described that the initial confrontation didn't work as all the injuries he suffered recovered strangely. Moreover, even the poison wasn't being effective on him, and Uchiha Shinichi activated the Susanoo and used a barrage of attacks which Kuroto continuously dodged. This went on for a while, but because neither side was able to connect their attacks with the enemy, so in the end, Shinichi's chakra levels started dropping and he retreated immediately, and even before Kuroto and others could pursue after him, they had to stop to confront the Kyumo unit. There is simply no loophole in this argument, because the surrounding forest was all damaged only by Shinichi's Susanoo, while the attacks from Kuroto's side were very accurate and restricted, so it is difficult to analyze them. Therefore, no matter who it is, they can't find any other detail based on the situation on the battlefield. There are simply no loopholes in what Kuroto said. As for the matter of golden light, obviously, it was caused by something on Shinichi's Susanoo. However, it was difficult to accurately identify it as it was some kind of chakra weapon. Simple and easy. After roughly understanding the situation, Jiraiya also deployed the Konoha Shinobi, and Kakashi too summoned his Ninken to search Shinichi's tracks. But because of the interference from Kuroto's main body that was with Shinichi, no matter how much effort they put, no traces of Shinichi's presence were found. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. With Shinichi's speed of travel after a little recuperation, 3 days was more than enough for him to escape the territory of the Land of Fire, and exactly as Kuroto desired, Team 11 didn't find any results and had to return back to the village. As soon as Team 11 returned back to the village, they were called to the Hokage office by Sandaime-sama. In the Hokage office, Sarutobi Hiruzen had a small frown, with eyes stern, seems to be busy in his thoughts. On the side, Shimura Danzo also looked gloomy and angered. The 2 other elder consultants, Mitokade Hamura and Udatane Koharu, were also worried. As the captain of Team 11, Kakashi gave a detailed report of Team 11's pursuit of Shinichi without missing any detail. By the time Kakashi finished his report, Sandaime asked solemnly, "That is to say, Uchiha Shinichi has defected to Kumo?" Kakashi shook his head and answered with a guilty tone, "We can't be certain, but the probability of such a thing happening is very high." Sandaime nodded and waved his hands to signal Team 11 to leave. With a courteous bow, Team 11 left the Hokage office. With only 4 members of the Advisor Council remaining in the meeting room, Danzo coldly said, "There is a Kumo spy in the village." This conclusion isn't very difficult to draw. After all, if not for the fact that Uchiha Shinichi was more or less induced by that spy, then the Kumo wouldn't have been able to respond to Shinichi's defection and send a unit personally led by one of the Jinchuriki into the hinterland of the Land of Fire. Not to mention that this time their arrival wasn't even noticed by the Konoha side. This means that the enemy had some information on the routes that had less security so they could enter easily. Adjusting his glasses on the bridge of his nose, Hamura added, "This spy was not only aware of the contradiction between Root and the Uchiha clan, bypassed the security of both the Umbu unit as well as the Uchiha police force to make contact with Uchiha Shinichi and finally send intelligence about the Konoha's border security details. This shows that his status is definitely not low. It is very likely that she is either part of Umbu unit or the Root unit." Danzo was obviously unhappy at this statement and said with a dark tone, "There will never be any problem from my Root unit." At this time, Koharu said with a mocking tone, "A mere Uchiha kid was not only able to breach the security of your Root base but also single-handedly annihilated almost all the personnel at the time present at the base. I even heard that many of your storehouses were also robbed. Are you sure that the spy didn't have his hands in all this?" "You." Danzo glared towards Koharu in annoyance, and finally snorted, "Fine, I will investigate the Root thoroughly, but this doesn't change the fact that there will be no spies among my men." Shimura Danzo had a big loss this time. Many of the Root shinobi loyal to him were killed by Uchiha Shinichi single-handedly, then there was a theft, most of the warehouses and secret laboratory he had were robbed by someone, even the few Sharingan he had left were taken away by the thief. And finally, Danzo's prestige in Konoha has also been affected severely, so his authority in the Advisor Council has fallen to the lowest of the 4. Sandaime ignored Danzo's look and nodded towards Hamura and Koharu with a serious tone, "I will conduct a thorough investigation of the Umbu members." Finally, with all the discussion over, Danzo stood up while tapping his cane and coldly said, "Hiruzen, now you should understand the threat posed by the Uchiha clan towards the village. If we leave them as they are, the village will sooner or later be destroyed in their hands." If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.